Hello, welcome to TRP News, the Rational Progressive. This is our first episode. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do and what's going to be happening here on this channel. First off, you probably see in your news feeds on Facebook and Twitter, there's a lot of talk from progressives and liberals about what the Republicans are doing, what the right wing is doing, and everything seems to be framed about how silly they are and what stupid thing they've done, and all the things about progressives are framed in that light. So I got kind of sick of that, and I wanted to have a channel or a news feed or a stream, an information source that is about progressives only. We shouldn't be wasting our bandwidth and our real estate, our media real estate, talking about Republicans and right wing and crazy people. I don't want to talk about pundits. I don't want to talk about Sarah Palin. I don't want to talk about Herman Cain. We'll talk about elected officials and what they happen to be doing. But this channel's not here to bash anyone, to talk about anyone, to call anyone names, or to get crazy. We want to talk about what's important and what matters, not just what's emotionally stimulating or what happens to be the viral news of the moment. We don't want to be just the other side of the coin. Both sides do the same thing. You hear that all the time. No matter how true it is, there tends to be sort of a rhetoric that gets inflamed, just like YouTube comments where people just get into a back and forth, and what happens is the real topic, the real subject of conversation just sort of disappears. The first thing we want to talk about is when we have these discussions and we talk about issues and what needs to be done, the role of government and policy. The first thing that has to happen, especially when you're talking about someone from a different perspective or different ideology, is that you have to define your terms. That's the first thing that happens, that goes wrong usually in most conversations. And I'll tell you, obviously I'm a progressive, and this is a huge thing that happens on the right, and the left kind of buys into it. We don't have to know what we're talking about. We can just argue and go back and forth. Well, what we want to do here is avoid the hyperbole, avoid the terms that are inaccurate, that color the conversation, and we want to speak the truth accurately and without embellishment. Voltaire said, if you want to converse with me, first define your terms. And he also said, judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. So that's an important thing. So just a side note, as when you're having these conversations, my advice is ask questions first. Make sure you understand what the other person's talking about, and make sure you understand where they're coming from and what they mean by what they're trying to say. So often, especially online, things get misinterpreted and misconstrued. So it's important to make sure before you even engage that you understand that you have a grasp of what the other person means. On top of that, what happens is that ignorance is a bane, but it's also a defense. Ignorance of the law is no defense, but ignorance online and ignorance in political discussions is a defense. Because what happens, people can always say, well, that's not what I meant. How many times you hear that? It's taken out of context. That's not what I meant. So it's important when you have these discussions, when we talk about policy, when we talk about politics, that we make sure we're talking about the same things. And what you'll find is that for most people who are full of rhetoric and rage, that once you take that step, you'll eliminate 50% of the conversations right there with people who aren't willing to actually have an honest discussion. So that'll save you a lot of time, okay? The next thing I want to talk about is what is a progressive. A lot of times these days, the words liberal and progressive, they become mixed, interchanged. People think of them as the same thing, and they're not the same thing. So by my definition, or I'm going to make that assertion, they're not the same thing. What I think of as a progressive is very specific, and it's not it's ideological, but they're not specific policy tenets that go along with it, okay? Here's a couple of definitions. Progressivism is a broad philosophy based on the idea of progress, which asserts that advancement in science, technology, economic development, and social organization are vital to improve the human condition. Sociologist Robert Nisbet defines 5 crucial premises of the idea of progress as being: value of the past, nobility of Western civilization, worth of economic and technological growth, faith in reason, and scientific scholarly knowledge obtained through reason, intrinsic importance and worth of life on earth. Now, I don't necessarily adhere to the nobility of Western civilization. I'm not saying it's not noble or that, we should get rid of Western civilization. I just think that Western civilization, Eastern civilization, whatever civilization you happen to be in, all can benefit from a progressive attitude, which is looking at how you can advance society and do the most for the most people. American progressives rejected social Darwinism, believing that the problems society faced, poverty, violence, greed, racism, class warfare, could best be addressed by providing good education, a safe environment, and an efficient workplace. So I'm going to have links down at the bottom here, and you can also comment in the comments. You agree, disagree, you can follow the links and take a look at some of the sources that I use here. Theodore Roosevelt was a Republican progressive, and Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat progressive. So it's not left or right. Progressivism is what's best. What can we do that will work to benefit people, for the benefit of society, that's efficient and that will move people forward. A progressive can be conservative at times and liberal at others. A progressive may feel in one instance government needs to shrink, and another that it needs to grow. And all progressives are interested in the efficient use of government for the advancement of society to the benefit of the greatest number possible. Okay, so that's progressivism to me. It's about a way of thinking about government. If we have to have government, then we should look at how we can use it to the best benefit, and that may mean sometimes we get rid of some of it, sometimes we add some of it, and sometimes we need to put more money into it, sometimes we need to take money out of it, and that just depends on what the society's needs are at the time. So that's where the science part and the education part comes in. We have to understand what's happening, and we have to know how we can approach dealing with it and influencing outcomes. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to do here, is present a progressive perspective that's free from hyperbole and rhetoric, and hopefully you can learn something and participate in the conversation, and we can all gain from it. All right, thanks for watching.